right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name's Mindy Dokas. I work on the Utah's Multicultural Disability Network project out of Utah State University. We're really grateful to have so many people joining us today for this webinar. I'm going to keep, we still have some people joining, so I'm going to keep letting people in, but I'll pass the baton over to Eduardo to kind of get the ball rolling in our meeting.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eduardo Ortiz, and I work at the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice, IDRPP, at Utah State University. And together with my colleague, Mindy Dokos, would like to welcome all of you to another webinar organized by the Multicultural Disability Network and Training Multinet. Multinet seeks better understanding of the challenges faced by people with disabilities from multicultural contexts. The intersectionality of disability and multicultural factors create a complex context that needs expanded conversations and learning opportunities such as this webinar activity that we are having today. As part of Multi-Network, we have developed other products and invite you to look at the link placed in the chat. I'm going to put it, or you can put it. There you go. It's right there. Today, we have the privilege to have Dr. Mark Standing Eagle Baez from BSU, Bemidji State University in Minnesota, who will present about understanding and working with disabilities among Indigenous people, the Sweetgrass Method. Dr. Standing Eagle Baez has written and presented at numerous events around the world about the Sweetgrass Method, which introduce ideas for cultural humility, continuous learning, and providing respectful support to individuals with disabilities from diverse backgrounds, specifically American Indian, Alaska Native cultures. Dr. Standing Eagle Baez is the president-elect of the Society of Indian Psychologists and associate professor of BSU in the clinical and counseling program. Dr. Baez is a licensed psychologist with a small private practice. He holds a PhD in general psychology and 2 masters, counseling and 1 in school psychology, with over 18 years of experience in mental health and wellness and impactful research among Indigenous people across the lifespan. It has inspired significant change in the field of Indigenous mental health. Dr. Baez has advocated for cultural strength-based approaches to Indigenous people and hopes to change community-based approaches among this group of people by weaving culture, traditional methods, and Western approach to improve Indigenous well-being. Just before starting, I would like to share with you some ground rules and reminders that has been typical of these activities. First, we would appreciate it if you introduce briefly in the chat, writing your name, location, organization you represent, and your role. Remember, this webinar activity is here to discuss, not to debate or argue. That is important. Also, any discussion should be focused and avoid side-deviated conversations. Please keep an open mind and be open to learning something new. Avoid making assumptions. Be respectful of others. Listening is as important as talking. Ask questions to gain understanding and clarity. Preferable, write your questions in the chat because of the large number of participants that we have today. And as part of the format that we have for today, Dr. Baez preferred to have the questions at the end of the presentation. And finally, keep your mic mute during the presentation. A final reminder that this webinar is recorded. So please, Dr. Baez, the stage is yours.
Niawengoa, thank you very much. Miigwech, thank you, Nalatsam, for this opportunity to share a little bit about what has been successful for Indigenous communities when incorporating more cultural methodologies of what we know that works in our own backyard. I do want to say that it's a pleasure to be speaking with you today, and I want to start by saying As mentioned, I am speaking here at BSU in Bemidji, Minnesota, which sits on the traditional territory of the Ojibwe and Dakota people. I'm Mohawk, I'm Pawnee, I'm Mission Indian, Quawitecan, and yet I am here among other relatives working alongside my relatives in ways that we can continue to honor one another and help each other, especially when facing adversities. As an associate professor of clinical and counseling psychology, I try to acknowledge and render visible Indigenous people who sometimes do not always get the attention we deserve. I do want to begin with the song, and this song is a calming song. This calming song is supposed to speak to our spirits, but the words that I'll be singing translates into that we are reminded to be aware of our place on earth and to fulfill our obligations to ourselves, to our families, to our nations, to the natural world, and to the Creator. The words say that we are awakened, stand up and be counted, for you are being recognized in the spirit world. And I begin this song just as a way of healing, of blessing, ways of motivation to empower ourselves to continue to do what we need to do to continue to help ourselves and help others. Ahame Majado Gilwa Bitaba Ginigu me gaina gunegi and goba ame majado give a wabi daba ginigu me gaina gunegi and goba hey neo. Hey, Neo. So I'm not going to go over this as my colleague, Dr. Ortiz, pretty much shared what this is, but I do want to share that I began my career as a mental health specialist, after receiving a master's in counseling, but didn't feel like I had a seat at the table for change. After completing a school psychology, a second master's in school psychology, I still had amazing opportunities for some change, but still didn't feel like I had a seat at the table, thus encouraging and motivating me to continue with my PhD in hopes that I can start writing evaluation tools, assessment tools, screening tools that work best for our people, my people. But the last thing on this slide that you see, my mission is to advance health equity among Indigenous communities is what drives me to do what I am doing. This still is steps that I'm taking to learn. My dad would always say, you will never know everything, Mark, but always strive to embrace knowledge. So I do that, and I always get excited when I'm with colleagues to collaborate and even consult to see what is working with our people. This right here, I just wanted to briefly go over and just to share with you. Essentially, the presentation is intended to be an introduction to a culturally responsive method of mental health approaches for individuals and working with individuals with disabilities. And I say mental health is because when we are limited in certain areas for whatever reason, we are needing that assistance. And when we are denied, there's a lot of things that factor in what we do next. So with this presentation, it's not so much designed to train Western-based approaches or Western therapeutic modalities. Instead, again, it invites everybody here as the audience, regardless of your indigenousness or non-indigenousness background, just to consider your roles as a professional, as a student in supporting Indigenous individuals or individuals with disabilities in hopes to identify any missed opportunities or true opportunities for healing. Things that I experience, I always take it good or bad. It's an experience as a learning experience in hopes that it was healing for the most part. So what is disability from an Indigenous perspective? And one of the things that I wanted to share with each of you is that there is no word for disability in our language, in native language, across the United States and even in Canada. Disability is much different, our understanding and perceptions from a Western lens versus an Indigenous lens. Indigenous perspectives of disability differ rather from mainstream understanding of what we know as disability. And a lot of that has been shaped by colonialism, again, versus our understanding as Indigenous people, as individuals with gifts, as individuals with talents versus individuals with limits. Indigenous people may not identify as disabled and instead view impairments as a natural part of human diversity. There's a huge polar opposite of what disability would define. But for Indigenous population, view impairments as natural part of human diversity. Those born with disabilities are treated no differently across Indian country. When I say Indian country, it's across the United States. Indigenous peoples across the United States, we say across Indian country, they're not treated any differently. And again, there is no word for disability in the native language. And it's not to say, and I will be more than happy to share with you how many Indigenous clients or students that I'm having to see to work on an individualized education plan, an IEP, or a 504 for those that are in college. And how do we understand this label, disability? How can we use what we understand to tailor with what we can as Indigenous people to be successful? And I'll be more than happy to share with you about that. And what I'll be sharing with you is a method that has really helped shape practitioners and professionals and educators working with Indigenous populations with disabilities. This is really essential to know about gaps in services. Not perfect, and there's always room for improvement, that we are looking at taking these steps to be more proactive than reactive. There's discrimination that we see in some of the services. There's a lack of diversity, specifically speaking, when working with Indigenous populations, or even people of color for that matter. The lack of cultural responsive clinicians and clinician bias. And I will share what I'm referring to in these. First and foremost, discrimination. Studies show that people of color more often receive lower quality services and care than white people. In the States, American Indian and Alaska Natives are more likely than white people to report discrimination in healthcare or services, and 23% of American Indian and Alaska Native report experiences of discrimination and within these support encounters. So even though it may happen, for some may not even report it. And I don't want to say that's just a Native thing, American Indian, Alaska Native response, not to say anything. But some will choose not to say anything or even come back for services. The lack of diversity, again, research has shown that when people are of the same race or ethnicity as their supporter, provider, um, mentor, even instructor, they are more likely to stay engaged in those services or in that education or in that treatment. And it's not always the case. My classroom are majority non-Indigenous people. So as a as an Indigenous instructor, I need to make sure that I am covering all the aspects of what I am covering, but also incorporating the respect that I have for humanity. Not just I'm just going to teach to Indigenous students, but to humanity and how we can continue to help provide that support for one another. This right here, the lack of cultural responsiveness, essentially is we could be professionals that provide cultural sensitivity. Example would be, I will not disrespect the person by saying A, B, or C, but I will not provide cultural responsive services that I know that'll work for Indigenous people. I'll just continue to use my Western approaches for this person. If it doesn't work, it's the person. As a clinician, as a psychologist, a good example is I had to jump through all these hoops as a psychologist, learning Western theory, Western approaches. And every time I brought these approaches that show evidence-based, Dr. Ortiz knows exactly what I'm referring to when we're talking about evidence-based practices. They need to be evidence-based. They need to show evidence. Well, we as Indigenous people do not open the doors to non-Indigenous peoples into our ceremonies. So there's not a lot of quote unquote evidence-based approaches. However, there's a lot of practice-based evidence among our community that incorporate culture. But going back to the lack of culture responsive professionals, it's very important to understand at every support or phase outreach, initial contact, screening, interaction, assessment, placement, service plans, whatever we have in place, that we continue this care and support for those that we are working with. If we need to be responsive culturally, what would work for this individual and their culture? Don't you think we would use that? You would think we would, especially if we're ethical and professional. But there are some professionals that do choose not to. On a bias, when we're thinking about this particular slide, I want you to think about, as educators, as practitioners, may have conscious or unconscious biases, right? Defined as unwarranted judgments, expectations, reactions to people's based on certain quality or group membership. We may have our own, right? Recent studies suggest that many healthcare providers working with individuals with disabilities have some impact that may not always be positive, specifically working with American Indian, Alaska Native, such as implicitly stereotyping American Indians as non-compliant. They don't get what I'm saying. So again, it's them, it's not me. I have this evidence-based screening tool that has worked with everybody in Boston, Massachusetts area, but it doesn't work with the Navajos in Navajo land. So again, when we're trying to look at what works best for our clients, that is the goal. The effect of these implicit attitudes, right, and or stereotypes was moderated by self-reported cultural competency and implicit bias training. So when we're looking at what we can do to dismantle those frames of thinking, really opens it up to ways that we can truly meet the client where they need those needs to be met. And again, looking at addressing this inequity in services by being culturally responsive is pretty much what I had shared previously. Addressing inequity in disability services specifically by being culturally responsive, again, what I was sharing earlier about disability, even that word disability. When we come together to look and to develop a plan from a Western perspective, it's usually, let's look at what you cannot do, and then we can build on what that looks like, and then we'll send that to your professors, your teachers and whatnot, and they can help you do what you need to do. When they come into that office of yours, office of mine, they come in with, I didn't realize I had a problem. Why is it that when we sit down, we're talking about all my problems, but what about all of my gifts? What about all of my talents? And let's work on that and maybe look at some areas that we do need to provide strength in, but continue to focus on a strength-based focus and what is working with that individual. Parents of individuals, specifically with disabilities that are Indigenous, come in with an open mind to a hopeful relationship. And if all you are doing is just poking and or addressing problems, that relationship's really hard on the jump. This is the first time they're meeting you, and you're saying all these things about their child, of what is happening. And it's that is where we usually see the lack of understanding, even the lack of trust, not a healthy relationship. I don't know who wants to get into any relationship if the other person's always just pointing out all the negativities and all the things they can't do. I don't think that relationship's going to last. But cultural responsive disability care can help address inequity, right, by providing fair and effective service planning to people from diverse backgrounds. Again, take one student at a time. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's all about how we can work with our students and how unique they are in that way. Recognizing and nurturing those strengths encourages success and promotes an open-minded support of environment that celebrates cultural differences. Culturally responsive practices are a framework approach in best practices. So if we can incorporate this ingredient, we'll have a successful recipe for success, if you will. So cultural responsive teaching for all us educators and professionals, it's not a secondary or supplement approach to education. This is something that we start initially with each of our students that have been on this road where we can begin those services on day one. So when we make these cultural connections, it's essential, right, that these engage with diverse communities and teaches about their cultural practices, also actively listening to our students' experiences. That can be really tough for some of us, where we need to be speaking and speaking and speaking and not so much listening, but listening to our students' experiences and being open to learning about different cultures and seeking student feedback. That has a lot to do with cultural humility, which I'll be sharing with you in a little bit. But again, by acknowledging cultural norms and challenges, stigmas, considering even historical traumas among our people, and recognizing socioeconomic disparities, again, actively engaging in practices that promote and honor who they are, really lay a strong foundation on a meaningful relationship. When we have a strong relationship, and I say meaningful intentionally, we can say, yeah, I know that student, I know that person, we know those people. It may not always be healthy. It may not always be a very positive relationship. So I intentionally say meaningful because we want to provide everything we possibly can for the success of that student with disabilities. Keep in mind, traditional knowledge holds the key to health and healing for our people, even for Indigenous American Indian Alaska Natives that are Christian, the faith, there's a lot of strength and foundation in the steps that are taken. So having this understanding is essential. So this may be done by incorporating culturally responsive approaches to prevention, right? And help raise awareness about incorporating culturally based methodologies. But Indigenous ways of understanding and knowing is, again, something that is the bedrock of who we are as people, and our family, our extended family members, and even our extended relatives have a role in our upbringing. That's a picture of my dad. He's retired military. And that's one of the things that he was sharing, is the power of knowledge and how it's essential to share that power for others like that. One thing that I want to ask everybody that's on the Zoom sharing the space with me, again, Niawin Goa Nalatsam, thank you very much just for taking this time to understand maybe just a little bit of something you may not have known. But a question that I have is, I'd like to, for you to consider one or two ways to incorporate cultural approaches in what you do, your practice or profession, or even as an individual that can disseminate or share the disability with others. So what's working in your institutions, community that is culturally informed or culturally responsive? For the sake of time, I would love to take them all, but I would love to hear at least someone from the audience to who would be willing to share briefly what are some of the approaches or practices that you are doing that's working in your institution or in your community that is culturally responsive or even culturally informed. Unfortunately, I can't see any of the messages.
I'll hop on and I'll read a couple from the chat. We've got a couple people that have responded.
Oh,
John
awesome.
Alexander said, honoring lived experience from the perspective of parents. And Jamie Emmanuel also said, we assist TVR programs in developing holistic practice models of service provision.
That is wonderful. Those are two amazing responses, very different. And you have what we're taking in as knowledge. You know, you hear that garbage in, garbage out. If you are taking in a lot of healing and knowledge and words that are grounding, it helps you become even stronger in the steps that you are taking in life. And of course, if we have our role models, our elders, our parents, our family that continue to help provide that guidance and steps towards success, that's something that I use in what I do today in my living, in my life. I always run back to mom, what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. But it's a lot of what I really truly have a grounding on is the respect for my elders and knowledge. This slide here is my family, some of my family, I should say. But as practitioners, specifically as educators, we know that strength-based approaches work best for healing, strength-based approaches. So we will have more opportunities for successful outcomes if we utilize frameworks from a cultural and context lens. If we have some approaches that incorporate culturally responsive activities, we will have more successful outcomes in that. And in this Zoom today, just thinking about the impacting of our people's healing. When we look at the concept of stories as evidence, as Indigenous people, our ceremonies as evidence, and Indigenous ways of knowing as evidence, they match. They truly match, just as valuable as Western-based practices. That's the reason over 15 years ago, I chose to develop the Sweetgrass Method. And I saw the value in our people's healing and mental health. So I developed something that was culturally responsive. Oops, I think it went. Something that was culturally responsive. And what I knew that was imperative is, although the Western-based approaches were evidence-based and they showed evidence, it wasn't working for my people. And so even colleagues, good colleagues, friends, had this understanding, Mark, I just think your people aren't ready to hear, or they're not ready to change. This is evidence-based. It's showing evidence. And if we bring it to the reservation and it's not working, it's the people, not the product. And it was frustrating. 2005, 2006, 2007. So I knew that wasn't the case. I just don't like what you're serving. We don't eat that. I'm hungry, don't get me wrong, but what you're serving, I don't like. So I started to think of how things like this could truly come together. So the cultural framework emphasizes a strong focus on community, deep connections in the natural world, respect for our elders and traditions, and a holistic view of health and well-being. Sweetgrass is an herb that's harvested and used for ceremonies, for cleansing, for purification, for healing, for grounding, for graduations, naming ceremonies. So this herb is used for sacred events, sacred experiences and opportunities. As a clinician, I knew that the people that I work with are sacred. They may not be doing things that are sacred, right? But I knew their spirit should be approached with sacredness. Thus the reason that I developed this approach. And the concept of the sweetgrass is divided, as you can see, the sweetgrass into 3 sections, each of which is a central strand. You see the introspection, you see the communication strand, you see the continuation strand. And if you look at the far right, the bottom right, you'll see that in each strand, there's many strands. So for the first one, the introspection, the self-reflection, us, we will never know everything. Even the day that we are put into this earth, we will not know everything. So we open that up to always learning, right? The cultural humility is, I'm Native. I don't know how many cultural certifications that I have on competency, but I don't know all tribes. I don't know everything about everything. How can I have this certificate that says you are culturally competent? Cultural humility really takes steps towards us of trying to know as much as we can and incorporate what we can to help the client in knowing what we know to be successful where they are. And in the introspection is weaving the best of Western practices in addition to weaving in the best of Indigenous practice-based evidence for our clients. So we're weaving both of the best for the client and looking at how I can really do my very best in their success. Communication, when in doubt, check it out. Always consult when you can. Communicate. My dad would say, if you don't speak up, God won't even hear you. So we need to advocate for ourselves, but also we need to collaborate with other students when we're doing presentations, when we're collaborating with other professors. It's essential that we continue to keep the open lines of communication for growth, especially for those that we are working with. And one of the areas that I always continue to see with programs and why they do not seem to be successful is the last strand is the continuity or the continuation strand, that we continue to provide ongoing culturally responsive services and strategies and supports for individuals with disabilities, as well as supports for families that we provide services for. They may come to our university and, hey, everything is great, thank you for coming on campus, and then it just fades away. And I kind of say it's like it's a honeymoon phase. Then all of a sudden, I'm at the university, and where's all my support? So within this strand, using the sweetgrass as a sacred herb, right? That I'm hoping that we as providers, as professors, as researchers, as practitioners, that we have an obligation to continue uh, to provide those supports at a high level, that same level when they just came in, that we continue to be their champion on questions that they may have. Now, you heard me say the difference, also incorporating Western-based methods. As we look at, Western applications, for those of you that are in school right now, those of you that may have already completed school, maybe you're in your master's or in your PhD program, we'll see this lens, right? Scientific rigor, theoretical, analytical, empirical evidence, and individualistic, and self-reflection. They're all very important, and I want to stress that. However, this is not the only strand. Another is the Indigenous strand, which incorporates respect and understanding and humility and community and relevance and self-reflection. The third strand, if it's for ongoing, it continues to have and incorporate culturally responsive services so that we weave in, and you can see onto the right, the actual sweetgrass that's braided in. You'll see there's strands among those strands. So there's not just one approach, like there's not just one Mark, and Mark learns this way. It's essential to know, as like any meaningful relationship, that there are important steps to keep in mind. First and foremost, educate yourself. Take time to learn about the history, about the culture, and the rights of Indigenous people in your area. Again, I'm coming from Bemidji, and I'm speaking to, for the most part, individuals there in Utah, totally different. There's things our Indigenous people don't like to eat that Indigenous people over in Utah may like to eat. Different protocols and ceremonies. So have an understanding of Indigenous peoples in your area, also understanding their experiences and perspectives is crucial. Again, just because they're from that area, we need to ask them what those are, not just generalize. So again, educate yourself, okay? The second step, build trust. Approach Indigenous communities respectfully and openly. I cannot reiterate this enough. Establishing trust is essential for meaningful relationships. Lay out intentions, no secrets. Like I can tell you right now, we already have a bad track record of mistrust with the government. You said you came over here, you were hungry. We said, hey, come hunt on our land. And then we came back when we were going to hunt, and there was a fence there. And we're like, hey, what gives? And people were saying, hey, this is our land now. We're like, land doesn't belong to us. It belongs to our creator. We're here to share with you. So this concept of trust and mistrust and building trust, we have a history of mistrust. So we need to regain and reestablish those relationships. And last is engaging respectfully. Initiate conversations with Indigenous individuals and groups, right? Ensure that, again, that we listen actively and value their points. Building a relationship requires mutual respect and understanding. And this is something that I use myself. Seek introductions through a trusted community member and demonstrate respect by following proper protocols. I went down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and I was told, Mark, You're native, you go down there, you're a psychologist, go help the people. I wasn't of that tribe. Contrary to popular belief, it was harder for me to gain trust among those Indigenous people because initially I was viewed as someone that thought I was too good. Oh, you're a doctor. Oh my gosh, you're a psychologist. Trying to think of words that have already triggered some of our historical events of even the word therapy just is a not a healthy word. So I started to come with understanding of I'm a guest, um, connecting with someone, who are the elders, how can I approach the elders on what is needed versus I know what you need. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm a doctor, you're not. I'm a psychologist, you have no idea. Let me just do my thing. Wouldn't work. So building those ways and engaging respectfully truly brought about our ways of building a meaningful and lasting relationship. So how do we put this into practice? The Sweetgrass Method. There are many research-based approaches to working with individuals with disabilities. However, there's little research available to inform our understanding of this within an Indigenous context. We do have a majority from a Western lens. And if we could at least take the time to honor our people's experience, and that's an acronym for HOPE, then we'll have a better understanding of where they are at that moment and how we can continue to help their success and support them with providing strategies tailored to them. So when we're thinking about what we can do and how we can do it, it's essential. However, professionals working with Indigenous people, right? Any framework to prevent and or address these areas of lack of support with disabilities must consider cultural context as a critical component of addressing specific issues. It's not, this is what I have, this is how I'm going to do it, regardless of who you are, where you come from. I get it. But aren't we trying to provide hope and more so provide success for their well-being, for their academic opportunity, for their experience in life? At least that's what my understanding was. The Western approach, again, is only one perspective on disability services among Indigenous populations. And incorporating, again, traditional Indigenous methods or methodologies is crucial to effectively addressing the needs of marginalized Indigenous communities. So the applicability is to weave in what we know. And I'm not saying throw away everything you learn from the Western lens, from the university. I went through those hoops, and there is so much valuable tools that I continue to use today that are written from a Western lens. However, who I am today and what I do, I've incorporated these Indigenous methodologies that honor who they are, but I also weave in Western approaches to show if I am doing is working, if I'm using some psychological evaluations, I need to see if something is working, but I tailor that or I indigenize that for those Indigenous populations that I'm working with. One of the things that is essential, again, some areas of struggle can occur for indigenous knowledges and cultural identities, because as educators, practitioners, professors, we're so immersed in Western knowledge, which is predominant in most of our approaches, what I had mentioned previously. This typically refers to a dominant viewpoint in the field that emphasizes, as I was sharing, individualistic, cognitive behavioral interventions, often rooted in theory and practices developed within a Western culture, right? These perspectives potentially overlook the unique, the beauty, the needs of cultural context in diverse clients, such as Indigenous populations, right? but particularly when it comes to addressing disabilities and challenges. And applying this Sweetgrass method, these steps, and weaving in the very best of Western evidence-based practices and the very best of Indigenous practice-based evidence for your students, or incorporating that as a student yourself, is critical. And I want to point out, this is sweetgrass, but I want you to think of the blades of grass that you see outside there in Logan, Utah, or throughout the United States. It's pretty flexible. If you go outside, I can't right now because it's filled with snow, but when it thaws out, there's grass there, and you step on the blade of grass, it'll bend, but eventually it will bend right back. And I use this intentionally for clinicians and as individuals with disabilities. As clinicians, we need to be flexible. That's not just one way. If this didn't work, you got plan B. If plan B didn't work, you have plan C. But please don't stop there, because you have the rest of the alphabet. Be flexible. Also, for individuals with disabilities, think of the flexibility that you have in different approaches or different individuals you need to speak with. Do not give up. Be flexible. Be your champion. Advocate for yourself. These on the picture here is a picture of myself in the center, and a picture of my son, and a picture of my daughter. And this is during our winter solstice, our gathering. And I put this up there because it's essential. The words that I'm saying, and I just want to preface this by not saying it's just a presentation, but these are words that have been given to me by my parents, that have been given to them by their parents. And this is what we do to continue to survive and thrive. But there are many Indigenous communities, right, concerned about the seriousness of disabilities, as well as the supports or lack of supports, but are truly eager to advance effective solutions. However, the same communities are also concerned about the perpetuation of colonizing, disordered focus, stigmatizing approaches to disability services, and social narratives related to learning essential steps. I looked at amazing work that's from a Western lens, and I was able to weave in what works for Indigenous populations to honor our people's experience, to give them hope, and to also respect them from where they are in their life and where they are coming from. Resiliency, rise above adversity. I do what I do because I love what I do. And I acknowledge where I come from, and I give respect to my parents and their stories of resiliency. Right in the center, you see my mom and my dad praying over my daughter and my niece. Off to the left, you see my dad again, right there. Off to the far left is my son, Calvin Charging Eagle. He just graduated with his bachelor's in psychology. I hope he's a psychologist like his dad. And then off to the right, the top right, is something that I connect with as a dancer, as a men's traditional dancer when I get a chance. Below that picture is a picture of my wife. She graduated in 2016 with her PhD, standing right next to my daughter, Megan Plenty Butterflies, and my grandson. He looks so scared in that picture. His name is Hayden Eagle Talon. And this is something that, again, just as a person that truly loves what I'm doing, the people that I approach, I do not take it for granted that they are sacred, that they were created by our Creator, and they need to be treated with sacredness. And it's not just Indigenous populations, but just how we can continue to take these steps as individuals, how we could take these steps as professionals, as well as collaborators like that. So I would like to again say Nyawin, And Nalatsam, thank you for your time. I'm hoping that there are some questions that you may have about this. There is something that I didn't mention. The sweetgrass grew out of frustration. I may have shared a little bit about that in some of the slides, but I was told when I just finished school that this is what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. These are the instruments that you're going to be using and how they're going to be used. And when they didn't work for my people, I was at a loss. So when I went back to some of my bosses and or instructors, it was with the understanding is it's the people. And I was very confused because I knew again that my people were hungry for happiness. I knew and I know that my people want to be successful, that we have these continued stories of joy. But as a clinician, there was just a miss here. And as I started gaining more strength, listening to my dad and my sister, what should I do? A lot of that had to do with sitting with my colleagues and saying, I don't think this is the case. I know my people want to strive. I know that they want to be happy. I know they want to be ahead, but what you are giving them isn't working. If we can tailor this in a way that they can accept this, incorporate this, hear this in a way that they are being spoken to with honor and respect, then we have something. And that goes to building that relationship. And it was missing in 2000. Ever since I've known, ever since I've gone to school, ever since I've gone to the doctor, I've never seen that. So I'm really incredibly excited knowing that this sweetgrass is now being used in New Zealand and in Australia, throughout the United States and in Canada. And it's something that I want to truly share so others can share with others. If you are a teacher or professional, that we have at least some steps to take in working with Indigenous populations. Even if you're a Native clinician or teacher or educator, again, you don't know all tribes and know all ceremonies like I do, but how do we take these steps to continue to work with them? So again, I do want to say, Nyawin Goa, thank you very much for your time. And please let me know if there's anything, any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Baez, for such a inspirational presentation. I do appreciate all your sharing. And now is the opportunity for everybody to write some questions that you might want Dr. Baez approach. If you have some time, Dr. Baez, to
Oh, yes.
while people is writing some questions, do you have any successful story that you would like to share with us?
Sure. I speak from lived experiences where I've had family members with disabilities, and then I'm Native, and what am I doing about it? So it really hit home for me to be more proactive than reactive, specifically for Indigenous people. So there was a lot of pain in speaking with other clinicians and practitioners, still saying, nope, that's not the way. This is the way. We don't accept this tradition, this culture, this ceremonies. I think 2005, 2006, it was really hard because I just felt like I was being denied in who I was. And how am I supposed to like share this with my own children to be honored in who they are? So I went on this quest and I used medicine, what we use is a sweetgrass, as the torch, if you will, knowing that I'm going to champion for our people, specifically those with disabilities. And it's just been an amazing blessing to speak with people throughout this globe in ways that we can continue to work together to help those with disabilities, specifically with Indigenous communities. And one of the things that I see and know it's so important that we need to put unity back into community. That if we truly take these steps in building these relationships and weaving in the sacred steps of the sweetgrass, we need to be united. And how we unite one another is to honor one another. Usually it's just one way. So I'm just hoping that we can continue this, to fight the good fight, and to be there to provide those services in providing hope for those that need it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I am reading a lot of thank you notes, Dr. Baez. I don't find questions. I think now is the opportunity for the audience to write questions if you do have.
Okay. While they're doing that, if anyone in the audience just wants to know a little bit more about the Sweetgrass Method, just go on Google and type in Sweetgrass Method and it'll pop up. And you could see those steps in addition to what I shared with you today, but some articles that were published and a book that was recently published specifically on Indigenous disabilities is something that you can also look at in ways to help you, help yourself, help others, right? So if you need to, or if you want to, you can look at that and type in cultural responsive methods into Sweetgrass and it'll pop up. Or if you just type in Sweetgrass Method, that'll pop up. I think a question just came up, I think. Oh,
yeah.
Should I read it or?
Yeah, it's up to you, Dr. Baez.
Okay. There's a lot, and I just don't know which one. But let me see if I just go off to the side if I could see. Oh, aloha. Oh, okay. I guess that's from. All right, from my relatives in Hawaii. Let me see. I think there was Caitlin Derby Yate, Caitlin Dene. Okay, from Jordan District, Native American High School. Okay, thank you for being here. There was something in here, I guess, yeah, there's a lot, but there was an individual that had shared that there was a lot of difficulties in nursing. I don't know if this person was a nurse, but had some experiences, and I don't know if it was lateral violence or what have you, but I'm just thinking when I was in the same position in a treatment facility, there wasn't a lot of support. It was all evidence-based. And that was it. And everything else was garbage. So when I just said, we don't let researchers into our ceremonies, there's a reason for that. It's not because things aren't where they are, but now we're looking at practice-based evidence. When we go into the community and we say, hey, Mark, what's working in your community? Don't you think that's better than just saying, hey, I built this, this instrument over here in New Jersey, and I want to use it with the Mohawk people, and it's going to work because it's working for the people there in New Jersey. Not to say there's anything wrong with New Jersey. Those are my people also. But I'm just saying being more culturally responsive is essential. Not just being, it doesn't work if you're just culturally sensitive. I won't offend them, but I won't do anything for them. So responding culturally is just as important.
Along with that, Dr. Baez, there is a question from Heather Cook that says, how can we be more culturally responsive when we are not of the culture. Want to be more responsive, but I don't know what would be helpful.
Awesome. And what was the name?
Heather Cook.
Heather, you came to the right place. If you type in, again, Sweetgrass Method, there's one. It's called Hope, Honoring Our People's Experiences with Intergenerational Trauma. And it's specifically for non-Indigenous professionals and practitioners. If you're not a practitioner, that's okay. But it gives you the steps, as I gave in laying out building a relationship, very, very similar in taking those steps. Before we can begin a relationship, we need to get to know about the person and to listen to what the needs are of that person. And the sweetgrass, because it is a sacred herb, it's supposed to be taken in a sacred context. So when we are building relationships or culturally responsive, we take our time, we don't rush it. So I'm hoping that by saying a couple of times of the sensitivity or the spiritualness of the sweetgrass, it's all about our experience of our relationship and the importance of how we can continue to support one another. But Heather, I have my contact number. If you want to discuss further about this, I'd be more than happy to share this with you. I do share this with, in fact, just last week with American Psychological Association, psychologists that are non-native, working with native. How do we do that? Again, it's taking these steps of the process of building those relationships, and it's not to change their practice or what they've learned as psychologists, but to weave in more cultural approaches that are relevant, not like back in 19 throw it away, but what's happening today, what's culturally responsive and what's culturally sensitive. And that sweetgrass method, as I mentioned, in every strand, there's more strands within that strand. That's what that refers to, is there's several steps, and how we take our time to work with others is essential, because we're dealing with an individual, a human being, a sacred being like that. So we take our time. Hope I answered that question, Heather. Okay. It says, I have one here. I'm not sure if it's for me. It says, keep camera off for bandwidth, or keeping camera off. I don't know if it's that person. Oh yeah. Okay. It's that person, I guess, because I'm just looking. Okay. Yeah. So while you are thinking maybe of another question or two, I will be heading to the National Association for School Psychologists and providing a keynote address, the very same structure of the Sweetgrass Method. However, it's not for disabilities, it's for suicide, and working with individuals that have almost come to the last end of what they want to do in their life, and how can we take those steps to bring them, to honor them, to continue to work with them in hopes of saving their life and honoring their spirit like that. So it is for all school psychologists throughout the United States. So it's not just for Native school psychologists, it's for anyone that's working with our communities and how we can help them help themselves. I can't be everywhere at once. Like Dr. Ortiz can't be everywhere at once. I'm sure we wish we could. So it's imperative that we teach others the right way in taking these steps, working with marginalized individuals. For Indigenous population, it's important for me to share these steps so that you can be successful when working with Indigenous populations.
Okay. There is another question from Renee Fetters. I am a mental health therapist. Are there any particular Western therapies or approaches that clash with the Sweetgrass method? You don't have to attend its ceremonies in order to study it. You can study the effects before and after. How the patients feel or medical data before and after.
That's a really great question. I have not heard any Western theory clash with the sweetgrass. Remember, the sweetgrass is flexible. So work with what you know, what works best for your clients. So you know your material, right? You know your instruments. With the sweetgrass, and when you're working with indigenous populations, you want to weave in cultural approaches. And it's not meaning I have to go to a ceremony in order for me to say, hey, now I know what it's about. But just to ask, again, just even asking permission for our people, that is huge. And sometimes we just forget that. We're all about the Western clock, right? The time. Hey, Mark, you're late for our meeting. I can't meet with you today. You're going to have to reschedule in 2 weeks. For indigenous people, it's not about the time. It's all about the relationship that's being built. But don't get me wrong. I need to go by the clock too. So I'm not just saying blow off the time. I am saying to honor the meeting and who they are, where they come from, what are their traditional ways of knowing, could be different from individuals that are indigenous that I'm working with, and they're all different. And the way you can do that, again, is, and every client that you are going to be working with, you're going to tailor every treatment plan for their success. With an indigenous client, is again to build those steps of getting to know them, right? Like you'll have the assessment or the screening, and then the assessment. You will not get everything from that because they still don't know you. Why should I tell you anything? I don't trust you. Again, it's about this meaningful relationship. And until then, you'll start seeing change. Other than that, they'll just tell you what you want to hear. So until we build this relationship, a meaningful relationship with no secrets, no hidden agenda, I'm here to honor who you are. I am not indigenous, but I want to know more about you and how we can help you together to be successful. Versus, I don't care where you come from. I'm the therapist. I have the license. You don't. I'm right. You're wrong. I know everything. You don't. We come in. I don't know if you have any clients that come in with, doing cartwheels. I don't have any clients that are happy. Well, they're happy to see me, but they're not happy to be there. Oh, great. I'm having therapy. And then they're going to come to see you, and then you're different from them. There's going to be some thought and some processing going on. So this is how we begin that relationship. There's no hidden agenda. There's no secrets. I'm here to do my very best to honor who you are and help you where you need to be. And together we can come up with things that work with you, work for you, and your ability to ground yourself, whatever that may be. And that's going to be different from everyone. So if we have this will be great. And this will be an amazing way to start a relationship. Okay. Yeah. I was just looking at one. Okay. Heather. Oh yeah. One from Shannon says, Bemidji area specific question. Are there any persons, events, or trainings coming up locally around this topic, or group meetings regularly around this? This is highly priority. I'm having something here in 2 weeks. It's for counselors that are working with indigenous populations, and it's incorporating the Sweetgrass method. Again, they have their theory, they have their license, they have their competencies. All I'm saying is weave in the cultural component for that client. It's not like, hey, I'm doing my thing, and regardless if they have it or not, it's not up to me. I'm still getting paid. It's about saving someone's happiness, recuperating that joy. So it really comes from a spiritual and cultural perspective of the sweetgrass. And it's not to say that you have to be a religious person, but just how can we honor one another like that? Okay. What do you do? I'm sorry. This one's from Peter. It says, what do you do in cases where Native clients do not want to have anything to do with their culture or cultural practices? Really, really good point. Honor our people's experience. Nope, sorry, you're Mohawk. We need to do something Mohawk. I got some Mohawk pictures for you here. Got some feathers over there. I need to shove it down your throat. Again, I meet a lot of clients that have lost their culture, are embarrassed because they don't know anything about their ceremonies. We're not even invited to some of their ceremonies. Again, at the very beginning of any relationship is I want to honor where you are at. And if you are open to taking those steps and learning more, I'll do everything that I can to help you help yourself. As a clinician, you could do some research about, of course, with their blessing if they want to. But I do have some clients coming in that are Christian, that are Native. I don't do any of this stuff. I honor them and their faith and where they are as a person, incorporating cultural ways, not saying, hey, you have to go into a ceremony, but in their identity, in who they are, as the Creator blessed them in who they are. If you're a Native Christian, then you're blessed. If you're a Native traditional, you are blessed. I happen to be blessed because I am Catholic Christian, and I'm also traditional. I participate in the Native American Church, and I just feel so abundantly blessed with so much that I really embrace that. So when I have clients coming in, it's about the client and letting them know and inviting them and asking them if it's okay. So I know that was a long question, Peter, but it starts with asking and doing your homework. Remember, how do we incorporate the Sweetgrass? We need to take those 3 steps, right? We need to do our homework. We need to find out exactly, make sure there's no hidden agenda, and also have a meaningful relationship like that. Let me see. Okay. I'm not sure. There's some others going in there. Yeah. You see. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The hope is, it's an acronym for honoring our people's experience. And I'll just add this also. It's pretty difficult to honor someone when someone's not perfect. It makes it difficult. Why is that? I don't know. How can we honor someone when they come with so much baggage with them? I don't know. I know specifically working with individuals that have had suicidal thoughts. How do you honor them? And it's all about where they come from and listening to the story and taking those steps together, where we can continue to take those steps in growth. Hopefully, we can develop a relationship and eventually develop a plan together, right? Like a healing plan. Some of us call them healing plans, and they're the same as treatment plans. But again, there's some words that kind of spook a lot of our people, like treatment and counseling and therapy. So we'll have talking circles, we'll have healing plans. So even changing the jargon, some of the wording to make it more inviting is essential. Any other questions or thoughts? These are some really, really great questions. Again, if you just type in the Sweetgrass Method, there's several articles, things that'll pop up, and it'll give you a more in-depth of approaches working with Indigenous clients like that. And yeah, and hopefully it'll be helpful for each of you. Yeah.
If we have time, Dr.
Yes.
Baez, there is another question there.
Sure.
I don't want to take advantage of your generosity about your time.
No, please.
Okay, Elizabeth, she said, is the Sweetgrass method only for one-on-one direct service, or have you seen it applied to broader programs as well? For context, I work for local government and provide grants to business and organizations.
It's starting to be utilized in a broader approach. There are some colleagues with Johns Hopkins that are using this framework to work with populations. And I have some colleagues that are utilizing this with Asian American communities, African American communities. First, I was like, hey, whoa, for us, by us. This is for natives only. But I'm thinking, wait a minute. If we are looking at ways to incorporate this as a means of rising up and helping them where they need to be, the clients, the community, the corporation, then that's what it's intended for, is again, working with each other, honoring one another, specifically where we come from and our background. So it's pretty interesting in how this woven approaches continue to weave into ways that'll help us. And again, I can't stress, the sweetgrass is a healing herb that we use. So it's used for good, however you want to use it for good. But remember, be flexible, just like the blade of grass, be flexible. So if it needs to be changed a little way, then you can make those accommodations. Specifically for individuals with disabilities, it's a must that we need to have that flexibility for the success of the clients that we're serving.
Great. I don't see more questions, and I do appreciate Dr. Baez or all the time that and all the knowledge that you share with us. Um, I hope that this is the beginning for a long collaboration, and as part of the work that we are doing, we have common goals, I believe. I think we are getting to the end. The colleagues on this project, Mindy or Sam, any final words that you have?
I'll just quickly jump on for those of us. I know a lot of people have jumped off the call already, but before you leave, those that are left, I'm going to share some questions just to help us understand the value that you received from this webinar. If you could please answer those before you leave, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Yeah. I think that's it. So I'll get those questions going. If anybody else has any other thoughts or things to share, we have a few more minutes, but I'll get those going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I was sharing with Mindy, I was actually there in Utah last summer, the University of Utah. We had our conference there, the Society of Indian Psychologists conference. I just love that area. It's amazing. Rolling hills. It's just gorgeous. Okay, I'm seeing the questions right here. Excuse me if I just, okay. Okay. And again, if there's any questions about anything, I'm currently associate professor in the psychology department, focusing a lot on clinical and counseling approaches and methodologies. And I do incorporate the Sweetgrass Method for those students that may be working with Indigenous populations. But I also am providing psychological, psychoeducational evaluations for individuals with disabilities that are needing more of a cultural perspective and lens that would add to strategies and supports for not only the family on the importance of receiving those services of special education or 504, but also for educators and professionals, professors, on how we can do an even better job in working with Indigenous students in our classroom setting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Baez. I'm so grateful that we could have this conversation. I think that this is such a when we think about it, I feel like it is such a logical way of thinking to be
Mhm.
respectful and kind to the people that maybe are different than us, or maybe aren't so different, but the steps that you have laid out in this framework make so much
Mhm.
sense. And I think that they would fall really well into whatever type of services
Mhm.
maybe you provide for people with disabilities of any kind, and really from any background. Like you were saying, it really helps to just bring people together in their diversity. So I'm really grateful for this, and thank you for everybody who is working through those questions. I wanted to quickly share, while
Mhm.
we're all here together, we have some more learning opportunities coming up with Utah's Multicultural Disability Network. I'll share our link again in the chat. So if you're interested, we have another meeting similar to this, but is focused on rural fathers from Guatemala, their experience with raising children who have neurodivergent disabilities or experiences. So if that's something that you're interested in, we would love to invite you to join us for that. That'll be in a couple more weeks. And for those of you who are in Utah or would like to come visit our beautiful state, we have an in-person conference coming up next month as well. So information for both of those events will be on our website, and I'll post that in the chat.
What I wanted to say lastly is I'm hoping that this opportunity that we had was an opportunity to begin a conversation. And that's with specifically with Indigenous populations with disabilities, but just even working with Indigenous populations is you don't have to be scared. Like, we won't bite, you know. It's better than not doing anything. And what I mean by that is I've had several colleagues saying, Mark, I just didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. So at least taking a more proactive approach with ingredients, right? So I laid out all the ingredients. So now you too can also bake an amazing cake. If you put the wrong ingredient, it may look like a cake, but it may not taste like a cake. So I'm just giving the basic steps of honoring our people's experiences. Ask the questions. Again, we're hungry for happiness. Who isn't, right? But we would love to continue to have partnerships or opportunities for unity that honor who we are versus our downfall, or this is your problem, versus these are all these amazing things that you do. Let's look at some areas that we can also continue to improve some other areas versus let's just look at all the things you can't do in the classroom and then we'll send you on your way. So at least starting those conversations is the first step. Honoring them like that is the best step. So we're just hoping that with those steps and with the Sweetgrass method, that we truly take it into consideration when we're treating others, that we treat them with respect, that we honor their spirit, and that we do the very best we can for their success.
And nobody want to go, Dr. Dr. Baez. That is the best indicator when people love what they are listening or what they are looking at.
Yes, muy bien, muy bien. Yes.
That's right.
Lastly, because I'm still thinking of how we could be more proactive, is just everyone even being here today and just sharing the space really speaks volumes in how we can help one another. I know this was mainly for working with our people, Indigenous populations and communities, but that we take the step to work with humanity, right, across the board. We've been given these steps, and I'm looking at Jamie, Emmanuel, I think from the Lumbee tribe, that we take these steps that we're taught and that we're given. Sometimes we don't practice, but we have these teachings and these steps for our survival. We are survivors. We're resilient. We've overcome so many things, not because we wanted to, but it's because we had to. And if we at least have that understanding that we can get through this together, then why not share this with humanity? And I know in ceremonies, it's always about respecting and showing that respect and then sharing that knowledge. So we don't continue, and I'm speaking as a clinician, that we don't continue to re-traumatize. And we'll do that if we don't know. So the best way to do this is to get to know our clients. We're working with Indigenous populations, continue to know that community. Not all natives are the like, but to get to know that community so we can do the very best for that community, that family, that person, that individual. Say go, Jamie. I see you.
Thank you, thank you, everybody, and thank you again, Dr. Baez. A great presentation. Thanks.